the Game of Life podcast coming at you, where we bring to you the behind-the-scenes lives of NBA players, business-savvy entrepreneurs, and top-level performers in all fields of personal development. The podcast that helps you become the best version of you. The Game of Life, David Nurse. Here we go. Welcome back to the Game of Life podcast, where we bring to you behind the scenes in the lives of NBA players, business-savvy entrepreneurs, and top-level performers in all fields of personal development. The podcast that helps you become the best version of you. This week on the Game of Life podcast, we have Jack Lengyel. Now, you might be wondering, who is Jack Lengyel? Now, if I were to say we had Matthew McConaughey on this podcast, would you know who that is? Yeah, probably so. We basically do. This is the real-life version of the head football coach of Marshall University, McConaughey's We Are Marshall movie. Jack took over the program as the head football coach after the devastating Southern Airways Flight 932 crashed into a hill just short of its destination, killing all 75 people on board. The plane was carrying 37 members of the Marshall University Thundering Herd football team, 9 members of the coaching staff, 25 boosters, and 4 flight crew members. The accident is the deadliest tragedy affecting any sports team in U.S. history. And Jack had the task of rebuilding not only the football team, but an entire community struck by complete devastation. We are very blessed to have Jack on the podcast today, and he's going to go in depth on what it was like transforming tragedy into hope, building a football team that had absolutely no players, literally none, taking walk-ons, baseball players, and hippies. Yeah, that's the truth. You'll love that story. It's coming to you. Jack's story is one of absolute inspiration. In times where Jack could have succumbed to the treacherous rebuilding road ahead, to the adversities that struck daily along the way, to an entire community basically putting the weight of their existence on his shoulders, Jack rose above it all and brought the town of Huntington, West Virginia together as one. I'm serious. Through this conversation having with Jack, it gave me goosebumps. It's one of the most tragic, inspirational, just real, truthful stories you will ever hear. And if you make it to the end of the podcast, there's a behind-the-scenes NBA story that nobody else has heard. It might be the reason why some players are going to other teams, but that treats at the end of the podcast, along with my 3 pointers, books I've been reading, health things I have been using, experimenting with. Gotta get to the end. Here we go, Jack Lengyel, Marshall Thundering Herd. Down, set, hut, hike, let's go. I want to ask you about, I'm sure the podcast audience will love to hear your story on when you arrived at Marshall. So you arrived at Marshall as the head football coach directly after the plane crash that everybody knows about, the We Are Marshall movie, took the lives of the entire team, the coaching staff, and you had to start by recruiting athletes from baseball and basketball and walk-ons to recover a devastated football program. I can't even imagine how that must have been.
Well, first of all, David, I did not arrive immediately. I was at the head coach at the College of Worcester, and we played for the championship on our campus for the first time in 34 years, and we lost the game to Wittenberg College, and they were the top football team in that league. And so I was home with my family sitting on the couch watching television when a flash came across the bottom of the screen, and it typed out that Marshall University's football program team plane crashed.
Wow. All
75 aboard perished. And, of course, my heart sunk, as I'm sure every football coach that were watching that television at that particular time. And we immediately thought about the suffering and pain of the parents and people involved in the crash. And then our second thought went to, I know mine went to, but for the grace of God, there go I with my football team and coaches and players and fans and supporters. And so I watched with interest as they offered the job about a month later to a Penn State coach. Mm-hmm. And he turned it down. About a month later, they offered it to a Georgia coach, he accepted and stayed for 2 days and resigned for personal reasons. And then I got to thinking about, well, maybe I can help. So I called them, drove down, and contrary to the film, and was interviewed and was hired. And I know that I was at least the third, but I can promise you probably the fourth, fifth, or sixth coach that was being considered for that particular position. So when I went down for the interview, there weren't many people there, and I completed my perfunctory remarks and asked, are there any questions? And of course, Ernie Salvatore, the editor of the sports page, was right there in front, and he was also a stringer for Sports Illustrated, a very, very renowned writer across the country. He raised his hand and said, Coach, he said, what is your goal for the team? And I immediately replied, to go undefeated. And he looked, and he said, Coach, he said, isn't that a little bit unrealistic? And I said to Ernie, I said, Coach, Ernie, I said, it may be a little unrealistic, but the goal that we are faced with is unprecedented in the annals of sports. And in order for us to have any opportunity of success, we must have those core values and goals, or we will not be successful. And I said, there's an old Chinese proverb that says that if you're ever given anything of value, you have a moral obligation to pass it on to others. Mm-hmm. And so that, in theory, is why I took that particular position, is because I felt that here I was at the age of 28, actually, and to be the head football coach at the College of Worcester, a goal that I was just proud and just had my goals set on. And now I needed to share that, and here was my opportunity. So that's why I took the job at Marshall University.
That's an interesting story, an interesting step to get there. But obviously, there was a reason that you were there. You might not have been the first choice, but you were the best choice. What was the hardest challenges that you faced in just completely, not just revamping a whole program, but basically a whole college, a whole community?
Well, I went down there with the idea of rebuilding a football program. And when I got there, I quickly found out that there were 28 boosters and administrators on that plane. There were 4 doctors and their wives, another doctor, state senator, city councilman, trainers, managers, radio personnel, vice presidents, community leaders. There were 70 kids left without one parent in the community and 18 without 2. So we were really in the process of rebuilding a community, a university, and a football team. And with the help of the community who was committed, I think that therein lied the success of the many people that had a lot of involvement in the particular program. I've never been to a school where the Big Green Club, the sports club, was like in the town and gown relationship was like a fist.
Yeah.
They supported the school. They traveled well with the team. They gave them money, and they were with them through thick and thin, struggle and success. So and still to this day, I don't know of any community that had that strength and fiber with their football team in the community.
Yeah, you might have had the hardest challenge of any college football coach probably ever stepping into a new position, because you didn't just have to build a football program. You were almost looked at, I'm sure you were looked at as you had to be the savior of the town. And like you speak about it being a fist, you created a family of the football team, a family of the community. That's just speaks volumes to you. How to go about building the football team? Take me through some stories of that first season, some challenging stories of getting players to play, practices, tough games. inside stuff
Well,
like that?
The first thing we had to do is evaluate the team that we had. We had 31 days to get ready for spring practice.
Man.
And we had only a freshman team. Well, what happened, we had about 39 players on the freshman team, but what happened was other schools came in and recruited the top talents.
He took them away.
Took them away. We had a player that went down to Miami University and became an All-American, and it was kind of like the Penn State situation a couple of years ago. The schools came in, and of course, parents and players. Some of the players did not want to play for a team that had a crash and killed the whole football team. So it was a difficult time in rebuilding the recruiting and so forth. That was a difficult task, but when we got there, as I evaluated the players, I felt that we had a couple of receivers, a couple of quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. The interior line was very inexperienced freshmen. That's all they had was experience. Very little. They played 3 JV games, and some of the players didn't get much playing time even in those 3 games. So we had a very inexperienced team. The real problem came was when we tried to figure out what offense we were going to run. We didn't have any experienced personnel or a team. If we lined up in a T formation, we wouldn't have made the length of our nose. They would have stunted. We couldn't get out of our stance practically. So I looked up the road, and Bobby Bowden was running the Houston Veer. Well, the Houston Veer is a concept offense. And if you, basically what it is, you just can't run a couple plays out of it. We'd punt on second down, and,
Wow.
You never knew. If we were in bad field position and felt like we didn't want to be pressed on that, we may just take and punt that ball and get 40 yards and at least be in position to hopefully play and stun. Now, defensively, we always stunted. And because we didn't have the talent to stand up one-on-one with those people, but we could stun. So if you, in your game plan in the red zone, and you were on the right hash, you were about 80% going to run to the left. We'd put 4, 5, 6 people in that and try to stop you. Now, if you ran to the right, you'd still be running today, see, but we gambled. So you could never tell what we were going to do offensively or defense because we were a gambling offense to take advantage of our ability or a lack of ability of physicality to stand up and play straight up mano-mano. So that was our offense and defensive philosophy. So that's what we did and how we used Bobby Bowden. Bobby Bowden had as much to do with our success winning 2 football games as we did as coaches. I mean, he was the one that gave us the opportunity to at least have the potential of moving the football and scoring. So when we came back, we were very pleased with that. Now, as the season went on, you asked about what was one of the biggest problems. Here was one of the biggest ones. It was a heartbreaker. All right, my freshman team that's playing now, the first year, everybody lettered, obviously, because they all played. And then the second year, I started to get a little bit of talent there. And by the third year, I had my freshmen were coming in and beating out a 2-year letterman. And sometime then I'd get a player would come up to my office and knock on the door and say, "Coach, I need to talk to you." He said, I was here when you really needed me. I'm a 2-year letterman, but I'm not getting reps. And, I would explain to him, that team football is a team sport, and team isn't spelled with an I. Sometimes you're a big piece of the puzzle. Sometimes you're a small piece of the puzzle. But we cannot get the puzzle put together called team without every one of you persevering. And you've got to play through, and there's going to be times you've got to be ready to play because injuries are going to come to us. But you all got to be a player, and you all got to be first team. Well, some bought that story, and some didn't. And the ones that decided to leave broke your heart because they were 2-year lettermen that gave of themselves to help this team rebuild itself. And so that was a really, really psychologically tough thing on our coaches and myself.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, too, with the word perseverance. Like, as much as you had to persevere in the adversity you had to overcome, you had to get those players all on the same page. And they might not have been all great football players. It might have been baseball, basketball, walk-ons. But you had to build and mesh a culture and a community, family in that football team too. And What's really impressive is in the first season, and talk me through this game, is you had a victory over Xavier, 15-13 victory over Xavier, where you scored on the final play. Like how exciting was that to see it all come together?
Well, there's a little story behind that. That was our second game, but it was the first home game. And when we played Moorhead, we took the whole town over across the river. This was our first game 10 months after the crash. Mm-hmm. And the important thing about playing Moorhead was Marshall University's football team was back on the field. And so everybody came to town, et cetera, et cetera. And we were, it was 16, I believe 16 to 6 at halftime. Not a bad score against a varsity football team.
Yeah.
And then they ultimately beat us 28 to 6. But we didn't have a kicker for field goals or extra points. So when I came home that night, I called the Parthenon, which is a school newspaper, and I put an ad in the paper: room, board, tuition, and fees for anybody who can kick an extra field goal. Report to practice on Monday. Well, wow. And I'm going to stop break right here. There were already 3 basketball players, seniors, that used their 5th year of eligibility and came out on their own to play for us. Bill James was a wide receiver, and he played for us. He was a starting wide receiver. Then we had a tight end, and we had a linebacker. And so they all contributed right off the bat because of their experience and talent as athletes. Now, we had those players, but then as we had to, now we're playing, we're going to play our second game against Xavier. And after a light practice, we're in shells. We don't have heavy equipment on. And then we did all of our corrections for the game and gave the scouting report. And then there was about 14, 15 guys standing around there. So I had the team wait there, and we kicked them, and none of them were very good. And now, you know, in the 60s, those were, there were hippies, freshmen, soccer players, and people that hated football. They were riding on campus, etc. And so I see this, I kick everybody, they're not very good, so I look over there, and there's this hippie with long beard, shaggy hair, soccer uniform, soccer shoes, and I said, "Son, you here to kick?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "You ever kick a football?" I said, "Yeah." "You ever kick it in a game?" He said, "No." I said, "Come on over here, I'm going to get this done so we can take the team and go eat dinner." So I put him on the 3-yard line, he thumps it. 10-yard left hash, he thumped back to 20-yard line, he thumps it. So I said, "Son, get a haircut, shave, got a scholarship, room, board, book, tuition, and fees. Now we're going to play, in 4 days, we're going to play Xavier." Now we're in the game, and it's about less than a minute to go in the fourth quarter, and we're about on the 13-yard line of Xavier's. And I said, I called Blake in, Blake Smith. I said, "Blake, are you ready to kick that field goal?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Go on in there." And he goes in, and the kicker's supposed to go to the huddle, say field goal, then we break. Well, Blake went out there, and he's putting his tee down behind the ball, 7 yards, right where he's supposed to be to create that perfect cone that he can kick it within 1.8 seconds, and we're fine. But then Reggie sees he's not coming to the huddle, so he calls field goal. Blake puts the tee down. He said, "Geez, I forgot. I'm supposed to be in the huddle." So he starts towards the huddle, and it's frickin' frack. I said, "We're not going to get this field goal off." Finally, we get the field goal off. Reggie comes off the field. He said, "Coach," he said, "I didn't know whether he was going to kick me or he's going to kick that foot field goal." And so now we're leading 3-0 on that field goal. Now at halftime, the score holds up, and I says, "Fellas," as we checked all our injuries, now get ready to go back on the field. I says, "Fellas, in the palm of your hand, you have one of the greatest upsets in the history of college football. All I need from you is 30 more minutes of perseverance, hard-nosed football, just like you played in the first half, and you'll have a memory that'll last you a lifetime." So we go out and we drive down and score. Now it's 9-0. Xavier comes back and they score, and now it's 9-7. And then we go back and forth. And now I tell them that Reggie, go out and get a first. Now it's about 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I said, Reggie, get two first downs. We'll punt the football. We'll win on defense. So he calls his third down play, and we missed the first down by about 3 inches. So we punt the ball. John Gompers, their big, tough tailback, takes it 47 yards, touchdown. They're leading 13-9. So now we get the ball. We can't move. We punt it to them. They start to move, and our tackle breaks through and tackles them deep, so they got to punt the football to us. We get the ball with 1 minute and 18 seconds to go and throw three incomplete passes. The next pass play, 13 yards, Jerry Aerosmith, first down. Next pass, Kelly Sherwood, 12 yards, first down. Timeout. Now we call the team together. And we say, look, we got to get this. Get out of bounds. We're going to throw a bootleg to you, Jerry. Get out of bounds, and we've got the last play because we don't have any more timeouts,
right.
and for a chance at a field goal. Well, he gets the ball, and he gets it, but they're running to the sidelines, and they catch him about 4 yards from the sideline and lay on him. The clock is going down. 12, 11. Now we got to send the play in. So we send the play in. It's called down from the box, and we send in the bootleg throwback pass. It's the same look, except the tailback slips out to the wide side of the field, and the guard pulls, and it's a complete reverse throwback pass. So now Reggie's got the ball, and he's under the center. It's 5. Snap the ball, Reggie. Snap the ball. 3. Snap the ball. 2. 1. He snaps the ball. The gun goes off. The game's over. He fakes. Jack Crabtree pulls, and everybody rotates except the backside halfback. Jack Crabtree levels him. Terry catches the ball and runs in unmolested with no time on the clock, and we win 15-13. Now we're running off the field, and everybody, the fans just jumped inside the stadium. We were mobbed.
Yeah.
And somebody's pulling my shirt, pulling and yanking. He said, Coach, do I get to kick the extra point? I said, no, son, we've won the game. So we go in the locker room. They throw everybody in the showers, including the priest. We come out about an hour and 45 minutes later, and everybody's still on the field because they had a friend, a classmate, a teammate, and in the neighborhood, etc., and they would not leave the stadium. And so it was quite an emotional game, and we upset that. And then we go on to win the Bowling Green game, which is even a tougher game. Yeah. And we win that one 12-10. So that gave us our 2 victories for the first.
That's got to be the most unbelievable feeling ever after winning that game on the last play. It's probably the most underrated upset of all time, I would say.
Well, we were like 3 to 4. Yeah, we were 3 to 4 touchdowns underdog going into that game.
Oh, yeah. And then you got a kicker who is a soccer player that just signed with the team, making a field goal, which helped you guys win the game. That's the best story there is.
Oh, yeah. And he, in fact, I just talked to him yesterday. He's marrying a gal in the Philippines.
Wow. Yeah. If you don't think that's inspirational, I don't really know what is. There's a lot more coming from Jack Lengyel in the second half of the podcast. But right now, I got to tell you about what I'm eating for lunch every single day. And as you guys know, I'm pretty obsessed with health. A health nut. But not one of those crazy kale, lettuce, everything has to be green kind of health nuts. I want my healthy food to taste really, really good. And that's what I do. I make a huge, massive smoothie every day for lunch with Ample. So let me break this down to you. Here's what Ample will bring to you from a health perspective. Ample is chock full of all the health quality goodness. It's going to give you quality protein for muscle synthesis and satiety, healthy fats including omega-3s and MCTs for fuel. For fiber and prebiotics, you have 4 different types of digestive and health for fullness, and you have 6 strains of probiotic immunes for gut and microbiome health. So the key is making it taste absolutely amazing. I blend mine with ice. I'll put half an avocado in there, maybe a little bone broth, and it literally tastes like a chocolate milkshake. And lucky for you, Game of Lifers, you get 15% off at the checkout by entering the code NURSE. So seriously, if health is important to you, which Man, I hope it is. Check it out. All right, so I want to update you guys on where I'm going to be so you guys can follow me or come on and check me out on one of these trips. I'm going to be over in Japan and Tokyo here at the end of August, start of September, heading to Maui, Hawaii after that. Love to have you guys join up with me sometime, but the main way I would love to follow you and hear from all of you is, man, jump on social media, David Nurse 5 on Instagram, David Nurse 05 on Twitter, follow Facebook, whatever it might be. I want to spend these international travels everywhere I'm going. I want to hear from you guys, see your best travels, see your best sporting events, whatever it might be, questions on the game of life, requests on who to bring on, hit me up. And if you want NBA tickets to a game of your choice next year, go to iTunes, to the podcast, leave a review on the podcast. Hey, if you like it, give me some stars. It helps. Talk to sponsors, all that good stuff. Keep this thing going. But yeah, if you want free tickets to an NBA game of your choice, go to iTunes, podcast, leave a review. All right, let's head back into the second half of the podcast with Jack Lengyel, where you're going to hear about his relationship with Matthew McConaughey, how the movie differs from real life, and his Christmas cards that he continually gets every year from Matt. You're going to hear about what Jack's definition of success is, what the most inspirational things are to him, motivational quotes he lives by, and words of advice that he has for all of you out there to better your life, to make yourself the best version of yourself that you can be. And basically, it's just a story. Jack's story is just so genuine about not giving up. When all the odds, everything is stacked against you, it's looking through it from a different lens, from a different perspective, and attacking it every single day. Let's go. Second half of the Game of Life podcast coming at you. When did you realize, what moment did you realize that, all right, Marshall program is back on the map, the Marshall community is back, revamped? I know the hurt of the plane crash would always live there through them, but was there a point in your 4 years there at Marshall that you realized, all right, I've brought this program back from devastation?
Well, I don't think it was in the 4 years. I think it was when I retired, I promised the governor I would stay there 4 years to rebuild the program and put the class structure together. Then the coach that followed me and the next coach both struggled. And then about the third year, they had a coach come in that had 2 winning seasons, and he went to Kansas State as head coach. And then the next coach was George Chomp, who I ultimately hired as Naval Academy. Mm-hmm. And he played for the national championship and lost it. They invited me back for that game. It was in out west, and they lost it in the last quarter there on a long pass. And then Bobby Pruitt came in, and who was an alumnus, and went 15-0, won the national championship.
Wow. So was that when you realized that? Was that kind of when you realized?
That's when I said to myself, I always said that, Bobby Pruitt was the coach that took us from the ashes to the Phoenix. Yeah. And I always talked about that particular situation when I talked across the country. Mm-hmm. And when we had the premiere for the movie, Bobby created a ring. He took the bottom half of his ring, which had the championship 15-0 and et cetera, and then he put my name on it, put Red Dawson's name on it, and the 2 captains, and then he redesigned the top of the ring for the young thundering herd, and he wanted a ring that symbolizes the beginning and the national championship. So he had those 2 pieces put together, and there's only 6 of those rings. And for Bobby to think in that way and present those rings to us at the premiere in Huntington for the movie We Are Marshall, I've always admired Bobby for not only as a coach, but his thoughtfulness in creating that symbolized from the ashes to the Phoenix.
That is really cool. Very cool. Talk on the movie. Give us the honest truth. Did Matthew McConaughey do a good job portraying you in the movie?
Well, let me say this. And whenever everybody sees the movie, and I speak, I said, now, if I have to do a Q&A, I said, I'm going to answer the first question for you. That's good. I'm going to tell you what the question is going to be about Matthew. My sideburns were not that long. I did not have a 5 o'clock shadow, and I did not dress like Bozo the Clown. He took great liberties with my persona, but I want to tell you this: he's a great guy and a good person, and I've enjoyed everything that he's done as a movie star, and he's a good friend. We exchange Christmas cards every year.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah.
So
he did. Yeah. So overall he did a pretty good job, other than the dressing and the way he wanted to make his look. The movie, the concept of the movie, they didn't change too much of it, did they?
Well, the little parts of it they did, but when I was walking back, I was on the set for about 3 weeks off and on, and I was walking back to the studio, or walking back to the football field, because they had already torn our stadium down. So they found a stadium in Atlanta, and it really looked like our stadium. It was dug down, and there was a concrete wall before you came into the field, and it was a tight field. And so he put his arm around me. We're walking back, and he said, "Jack," he said, "I just want you to know one thing." He said, my dad was a football player, so I had some experiences there. In fact, his dad played for Kentucky and under Bear Bryant, and then in his sophomore year, he told Bear that he was going home to get married in Texas, and he said, "Son, if you go home to get married, don't come back, because I don't have married players." Yeah. And so his dad went home, got married, didn't come back. I think he finished out at Texas Tech. But anyhow, he had that experience with his dad, and he's talked to other people. He said, I looked at they came and scanned a lot of my information and write-ups when I was here in Sun City Grand, and they took them back, and he read all of them. He says, and I said, "I want to let you know," he said, "I did not try to mimic you." He said, "What I did is take all that material, I absorbed it, and I portrayed it as if I were the guy and what I would have done." I said, "Well, Matthew, I'm sure glad you told me that, because I was never that animated on the frickin' sidelines." And he laughed, but overall, yes, they told the story, but there were some parts in it, like, for instance, Matthew Fox, who was his co-star in the movie, they wanted to elevate his stature a little bit more. So, like, for instance, when they had Red give up his seat, Red actually drove down to the game and drove back. The guy that went down on the seat was a freshman coach, and his mom and dad drove up from Florida, and he had dinner with them, so he rode back with Red, which left that free seat, and that's when Deke Brackett, the punting coach, got on the plane. But they created the situation like where Red gave it up. That was inaccurate, and then Red was never offered the job. There were some problems. The coaching staff were the coach that they had hired was a pro coach, and they were doing illegal things and giving kids money and et cetera. The NCAA got them to fire that particular coach. So Red really didn't have an opportunity to get the job and was never offered the job. And but the little things like, and then the father that was a plant manager, he was a composite character of all the fathers who lost a child. The cheerleaders, interesting story here, the AD called him in and said that we don't have room to take all of you, but we'll take half of you on this trip, and we'll take the other half on the other next trip. And so the cheerleaders went back to the sorority house and agreed and said, "Look, if we all can't go, we'll just drive down," and that saved their lives. There were stories.
So the cheerleaders were going to be on that flight.
Yes, half or but they decided that if they all couldn't go, that they would drive down and then stay together as a team, and that's exactly how they saved it. It saved their lives. The equipment manager, John Hagan, was a superstitious little guy, and the team's leaving on Friday the 13th. So he goes to the coach and said, "I got a truck." He said, "I'm driving down, and I'm going to drive the equipment back." And it saved his life. Wow. Then there was a parent of one of the players who flew to the city in South Carolina instead of the city in North Carolina, and so he rented a car and drove up to the game, and the team's coming off the field. He said, "Coach, I went to the wrong city and in the wrong state." He had to drive up. He said, "Do you have an extra seat on the plane so I could ride back with my son and spend some time with you?" He said, "Sure, get on." And so there were stories after stories like that.
Yeah.
That was back at a time you probably may not remember, but where you could go, when you went on a plane, you could put a quarter in and get insurance.
Oh, my gosh.
And
yeah,
so
you can still do that at LAX.
Is that right?
No, I'm kidding.
Well, anyhow, one of the players did that, and his girlfriend did get the insurance on that plane. So, I mean, there was story after story like that, and you can imagine, as I said, with 70 kids without one parent and 18 without two parents. In fact, one family had 4 children, and the 2 had to be given to one relative and the 2 to another relative. Wow. And so they grew up separated after that particular point.
Wow. There are some unbelievable stories of heartbreak, but just unbelievable stories that you put them together. And I know you're a very modest person, and you don't give yourself as much credit as you deserve, but you put together back an entire community and family, and that speaks volumes to your leadership and who you are as a person. And what are some mottos that you live by? You've been extremely successful in your career. What are some mottos that you have just lived by through the hard times, through the good times, that you can tell?
Well, I think the most important thing, and I always preach to my players about, is to first of all, you're very kind in your remarks, but I want to tell you, I got a lot of help from the Big Green and the supporters in the community. Well, my motto pretty much was and I preach to the players every time I can as a football coach throughout my 40-plus years of association with teams, as a football coach and athletic director, is be the best you can be. And always persevere. Always persevere. If you got to go around the bus, go around the bus. You got to go under the bus. You got to go over the bus, or you got to go through the bus. But you've got to persevere. And as Winston Churchill said, never, never give up.
Yep.
And I think those particular words are conducive to any young man going through puberty as a high school player or college player just coming into college, learning about what the real world is like, is to give him that ability to sustain, to persevere, because you don't fully mature till you're about 26, 27, they say, and you're going to make some foolish decisions.
Yep.
And one of the things I always talked about our players about discipline is that, look, whenever you're in a situation and somebody says, well, how about take some of this marijuana or coke and try it out, the first thing you should always say, or you've been drinking and you're getting ready to take your buddies and you're going to drive, you say to yourself, what are the consequences?
Yeah.
What are the consequences if I take this car and drive and we get in an accident and I get killed or my buddies get killed and I survive? He said, what are the consequences of that? All right, well, my parents are going to be very upset. I kill friends, their parents are going to be very upset. All right, so what should I do? All right, here's my keys. I'm not going to drive. Or they say, well, let's go and toilet paper the trees around Coach's house for this great victory. Well, what are the consequences? Coach is going to be upset. The guy will have a lot of fun doing it, building a team. So we go ahead and we toilet paper the trees, But I think if you ask yourself the question, I think most kids, 90+% of the time, will not do the bad thing.
Yeah,
if you say, what are the consequences, and then think about your parents and all the things that you're going to create, the concentric circles of harm or concentric circles of good fun, good clean fun and enjoyment. And I think you'll, generally speaking, most of the time, more than most of the time, you'll make the right decision.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to a kid. Before they make a decision, look at in the future what the consequences are going to be. That's great. And love the perseverance. Love that. I mean, you showed it throughout your whole career and throughout especially your time at Marshall that you persevere, you will make it. There's going to be some hard times, but all about persevering. And like I said, I mean, you have been extremely successful. You have very successful children. What is your or what's your term or what's your definition when you think of the word successful? What do you think of?
Well, I think to look at what you've been successful by, I think you have to look and be measured by how many lives you've been able to assist and guide through your football coaching years, and then your value added and your success is determined by the success in their families, their professions, and their communities, and how they come back. And then they say, Coach, I remember the time you said to me when I had this little run on whatever, etc. Now I see the value when I'm working with my kids, and I want to thank you for that. So I think the thing what measures the success of your life is the value added to those that you served, and I think it's not monetary. It's those things that come back to you years after that reinforce the fact that you were right and you added value to that individual's life.
That's such a good definition. Is being a servant and giving back. What's the best advice that you have ever gotten?
I think the best. But my mom and dad are from the old country. They came over when they were 7, 8 years old from Hungary, and they came in Sturridge with the cattle. And when that boat got to Ellis Island, it was about 1.5 feet deep in the steerage. So the boat had a leak, and they were very lucky to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And so they came to America, and then they came across to Akron, Ohio, and where the rubber factories were. And as as he worked his life, he was always a person that we never had. My dad always had a garden, big garden, and shoveled it out himself, dug it up himself. We always butchered a hog every year for our meat. We canned all the fruits and vegetables. We were poor, and we never knew it. My dad always told me, "You got to go to college, son." Of course, he never even finished grade school. He gave me the advice that you got to go to college, and I think that was the best advice that started me on a trip of adventure. I was always a good student in school, but I was always cutting up. I always sit in the back of the room and have a good time, and then about the second week, I was always sitting up in front with the teacher because we had some. But I enjoyed having a good time, and I ended up at my college. I was a cartoonist, and I was our school cartoonist for 4 years. I was the art editor and things like that. So I by doing different things and rounding yourself out in that college, we didn't have magazines in our house. We couldn't afford magazines. So my education and things were through my dad was stern discipline, follow through, do what's right, and then I added the college and the education by my teachers, and had a good time doing it all the way.
That's great, man.
So I think that was my best advice, and that was from my dad, and then, of course, my mother as well.
That's awesome. Jack, you have an absolute story of inspiration, overcoming adversity, and just being a great leader. And hearing your voice and hearing you talk, you just have a positive vibe to you too. That's very infectious. And I can see why you were the right one chosen for that job. It might not have been the first choice, and it might not have looked like you were the one that was supposed to be there, but you were definitely the one that God had in the plans to rebuild Marshall and rebuild the community. And you got an awesome story, and I really appreciate you coming on and telling the audience about the story.
Well, David, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and wish you every success in all your ventures now that you're going out and expanding some of your thoughts about your motivational speaker, and you're helping people learn how to shoot the ball better.
There you go.
I mean, that's all part of it, you know.
I appreciate that, man. How can everybody find out more about you and just research you more? Are there any foundations or ways we can find out more about you?
Well, I think there's I don't go to this site. I know I went to it once just to see something on it, but there, just Google my name, and it seems like they keep up with what I do, and so you'll see various things on there, and I think it'll keep you up to date as to what's going on in my life, at least I think. And then we support a lot of charities in Phoenix here locally. Like, for instance, there's the 100 Club, and that's for police and fire officers, families of those men and women who were lost while on duty. And I work with a Fiesta Bowl because they have a lot of their money goes to charities in Phoenix. And I speak to local charities all the time around the area, in grade schools and high schools.
Great, man.
Then I went on a USO tour of Afghanistan and Iraq for 14 days with the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, Mike Mullen, who was a Naval Academy grad. I met him when he was a commander, and little I know he grew up to be the #1 admiral in the world, but he asked me if I wanted to go to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I went 3 weeks with him, and we had to wear bulletproof vests and flew Black Hawk helicopters, no doors, 50 cals hanging, and go to 3 FOBs, forward operating bases, every day. Mm-hmm. And that will level your thinking about what is important about America. Yeah. It was a pucker trip, boy. I mean, we were in battle areas, and we landed in Camp Tillman. That was named after the player here for the Pat, and they had just mortared Humvee as it came in. It blew the back end out. No one was hurt, but we were about 4 or 5 miles from the Pakistani border. So it was one that was a very sobering trip that will make you feel great to be American and see what those young kids do.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome, Jack. Big time Game of Life thanks to Jack Lengyel for coming on the podcast. He is literally a living legend, and you heard it in depth behind the scenes on how he took Marshall University after the most devastating event, the plane crash in American sports history, and turned it around. Took Huntington, West Virginia, and brought them back to life, gave them hope, just through his perspective, his never give up attitude. Jack, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. We are blessed to have heard from you. And please go check out everything Jack is doing. The links are in the show notes. Learn more about Jack. And like he said, just Google him. That's when you know you are legit, when you can say, just Google me. All right, now we're going to jump into the 3-pointers of the week, and the 3-pointers are going to change a little bit. They're going to be 3 things that I'm learning on for the week, experimenting with, health, fitness, basketball insight, just self-improvement type areas, biohacking, life hacking. So I'm going to jump off with number 1, a book that I'm reading. The book is called Essentialism by Greg McCowan. The way of the essentialist is not about getting more done in less time. It's about getting only the right things done. It is not a time management strategy or productivity technique. It is a systematic discipline for discerning what is absolutely essential in your life and then eliminating everything that's not. So we can make basically the highest possible contribution towards things that really matter. Essentialism by Greg McCowan. Number 2 in our 3-pointers is a health product that I'm using. Health product or a herb. It's ashwagandha root. Taking ashwagandha root pills. So what it is an adaptogen, meaning that it can help your body manage stress of all sorts. Benefits for your body and brain. It's a medicinal herb, ancient medicinal herb. Can reduce blood sugar levels. Has anti-cancer properties. Reduces cortisol levels, the stress hormone, reduces stress, the anxiety, Symptoms of depression, it can boost testosterone and increase fertility in men. Ashwagandha may increase muscle mass and strength, reduce inflammation, lower cholesterol and triglycerides, and may improve brain function, including memory, which I definitely need. And yeah, basically it's a lot of really beneficial stuff packed into a root, into a capsule, and I take it in the morning and before bed, also helping with sleep. So literally everything packed into one. Check it out. Number 3 in the 3-pointers, a little basketball insight for you. Give you a little behind the scenes of what's been going on this week, the past couple weeks. So I'm out here at UCLA in LA, and a lot of times in the summertime we'll get a lot of NBA players coming out here. So just to give you an example of what's going on, this past couple weeks we have had James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Carmelo Anthony, Jimmy Butler, DeMar DeRozan, all playing pickup basketball against each other, and over 20 NBA players altogether. So basically, that's upwards of around $1 billion on court playing pickup basketball in the summer in a gym with no air conditioning, no seats, no fans, and just getting after it. Like this gym, it's the top of a recreation center, has been around since John Wooden at UCLA. It is old school. And I might just have to do a podcast on this gym. It's just got a special aura about it. It's a secret gym. I'm kind of giving away the secret, but I'm not going to say much more about it. Kareem, Magic, Jordan, everyone who was anyone in basketball has came through this gym in the summertime, played pickup. And, oh yeah, Kanye West asked me to play pickup as well this week with him. Let's just say he's not 7 feet tall or 6 feet. Thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of The Game of Life. Please go leave a review on iTunes. Let me know any questions that you have, comments, how I can keep improving, how we can keep improving together. And anyone you think I should bring on, any sponsors. This is how we're able to do this podcast, through sponsors, through your viewership, through your downloads. Tell everyone you know, The Game of Life podcast. It's coming out. It's growing. Hit everybody up that you know in your family, your neighborhood. Anyone you see on the streets, let them know about The Game of Life. And remember, it's all about the journey. Enjoy the journey. Live each day with passion and purpose. Game of Life, David Nurse, signing off.